Well, along with that poll on the president's credibility, we are also seeing new numbers showing a growing number of Americans disappointed with how the president is handling his job. The CNN poll showing just 45% of those surveyed think the president is doing a good job. These are job approval numbers, and now these have tended to hold steady for the president, but they are dropping now, and you can see that 54% now disapprove of the job he is doing. This at a time when the Obama administration is starting to come under fire for a trip to Africa for the first family later this month. A trip that will reportedly cost American taxpayers up to $100 million, with much of that money going toward dispatching hundreds of Secret Service agents and airlifting dozens of support vehicles to the region, including 14 limousines. Critics point out that families still cannot tour the White House because of budget cuts. Chris Stirewalt is our Fox News digital politics editor and is the host of Power Play on FoxNews.com Live. Let me just start there. The Obama family had to cancel their planned tour, their planned African safari, because the Washington Post started to ask them questions about the additional costs that outing would add onto this trip. And, you know, there is a question of whether they are a little tone deaf right now, Chris, as the American people cannot take their own little safari, you know, their own trip and vacation into Washington, D.C. right now. At least they can go to D.C., but they can't go to the White House. And how that would have looked to see the first family out on safari. You know, the Washington Post may have done them a favor.
Well, probably not any favor once people think about that $60 to $100 million price tag for the trip. You know, sort of like, couldn't the president have Skyped? And he can't, because he's got to fly the flag. He's got to be our representative around the world and do all of that. But as you say, the extra costs and all of that. Now, I bet there are some snipers that are sorry that they're not going to get the chance to shoot a cheetah
because that's literally what the plan was. Some of the extra expense for the safari was we were going to have Secret Service members go over there and get ready to shoot cheetahs if they tried to attack the first family.
You can't have a leopard eat the first daughters, so you would shoot them. It's what happens. That's how it goes. There's something in the manual, I'm sure. But here's the situation for the president: a guy who has declined to take strong stance. He talks a good game. He talked a good game in his State of the Union address. He talked a good game about being this transformative liberal in his second inaugural and all this stuff. But in the end, and we see it in Syria, we saw it on his health law and stimulus, on everything, he is capable of accepting the worst of all possible worlds. So you arm the rebels, but not very well. You have tax increases, but you also have reductions to spending. So it's like, you know, he looks like a person increasingly who is totally trapped by Washington. He looks like a creature of Washington. And as people say, hey, what about us? You were the guy that was going to protect our civil liberties. You were the guy that was going to change Washington. You were the guy that was going to break the mold. And not only does he not seem able to do those things, he doesn't even seem inclined.
Yeah, they say on the Africa trip, they say that the president really needs to forge stronger economic ties with leaders in Senegal and Tanzania. He really needs to do that to the tune of $60 and $100 million. As you point out, there is Skype. I guess it's not as effective, but in any event, they need to. And Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes says that there will be a great bang for our buck on this trip. That's really going to do a lot for our relations in the region. I mean, it's not that he's the first president to take an expensive trip. Traveling as the first family costs a lot of money. When I mean, we do willingly pay for their security. I mean, happily pay to keep them safe. But the question is whether really that visiting Senegal and Tanzania, is that critical right now?
Well, it's not talking about the alphabet soup in which the president is currently sunk of the IRS, AP, DOJ.
Distraction?
Well, distraction, but also you got to get out. You got to stretch your legs a little bit. He's running out of time. You're not going to have many chances to take one of these. With Bill Clinton, we famously called it the sorry safari, as he went to Africa to apologize for slavery and do all this stuff. You know, this is a big thing for Obama, and it's understandable that they'd want to do it, But the problem is this: when Timmy from Dubuque can't tour the White House, but the first family gets a trip to Africa, it doesn't look right.
Yeah, we're sending a naval carrier over there to make sure that they've got protection off land. And
from cheetahs.
They say you could have 1,350 weeks of White House tours for what this is going to cost. But I want to ask you whether this impacts these approval numbers, because they are starting to sink for the president. It doesn't. The Teflon, nature of the presidency doesn't seem to be staving off this controversy anymore, as the approval numbers are falling. And it's not just overall. When you look behind those numbers, a big drop, a drop of 9%, first of all, in those who believe he's trustworthy. And then when you look at young voters and independents, Chris, voters 18 to 29, his approval numbers are down 17 points. Independents down 10. What does that mean? Do we care when, this is a president who has already won his second term? Does this affect midterms? How is this relevant to our lives?
Well, look, I don't know. I'm thinking if you did a carrier-based airstrike on a cheetah, you would probably do better with younger voters. But we'll have to talk to the polling unit to figure that out. The truth is that for the president, with those younger voters, this NSA thing is just heinous. They hate it. They feel like he betrayed them. And that's very bad. But it all adds to, and I think you're right, that it doesn't look like a straight line connection, but it all adds to these White House tour, African trips, but not White House tours, and all of this stuff adds to the perception of a guy who is failing to change the discussion in Washington and is sort of distant from the people.
Failing to change